Oh, hello. Today we're going to discuss close reading. Every time you read a text, a story, a novel, a memoir, an essay, an article, it has some kind of effect on you. It interests you or it doesn't. It creates a certain kind of mood or atmosphere. It causes you to have a certain kind of emotional or maybe ethical reaction. It causes you to think about certain things or to have certain ideas. This happens automatically. Even if a text completely confuses you, that's an effect that it has on you. And it might even be the effect the author hopes the text has on you. Close reading is the process of carefully and actively analyzing the language of a text in an attempt to figure out how it has the effect that it has on you, and to see what other kinds of effects it could have on you. It's an attempt to figure out what kinds of moods, emotions, and ideas a text can produce and how it produces them. It's also the basis for developing an interpretation of a literary text, which is what you will be doing in each of the 3 essays you write this semester. So how is it that when you read a series of letters on a page, you end up experiencing new feelings and having new thoughts? To figure that out, let's look at one of the texts I assigned you for today, Lydia Davis's very short story, In a House Besieged. Just so you know, Lydia Davis is a very famous American writer. She's still living and lives in upstate New York, actually. She's written 1 novel, but she's most famous for her short stories. She's personally one of my favorite writers ever. First, I'll read In a House Besieged. In a house besieged. In a house besieged lived a man and a woman. From where they cowered in the kitchen, the man and woman heard small explosions. "The wind," said the woman. "Hunters," said the man. "The rain," said the woman. "The army," said the man. The woman wanted to go home, but she was already home, there in the middle of the country, in a house besieged. So there might seem to be very little going on here. We have a man and a woman hiding in the kitchen of their house because they hear what seem to be small explosions outside, and they each speculate on what might be causing the sound of the small explosions. That's it. It might not seem like much of a story or much of anything. But at the very least, there's a mood here. For me, the situation the man and woman are in seems very ominous, frightening, even dangerous, maybe also hopeless. Yet very little happens in the story, and we learn very little about the situation. Who the man is, who the woman is, where the house is, what's causing the sounds of explosions. So what produces this mood? To try to figure it out, we're going to perform a close reading. First, let's consider word choice, the specific words Davis chose to use. What are the man and woman doing in the kitchen? They're cowering. What is it to cower? To cower is to crouch in fear. It's to be like. So that word alone tells us that the man and the woman are really frightened. They're so frightened they are reacting physically. Their bodies are contorted. Now, let's look at the words the man and the woman use in their dialogue. The woman suggests the sounds might be wind or rain. These are natural sounds, and they probably won't cause serious damage since she didn't say hurricane or storm. It's almost like maybe she's trying to reassure herself and the man that they're not in serious danger. But what words does the man use? The man suggests the sounds might be hunters or the army. These are not natural sounds. They're man-made, and they're also seriously threatening, since in either case, bullets could fly through the home and potentially even hit them. So what's going on with the man? Is he more afraid than the woman? Or is he cruelly trying to make the woman more afraid, tormenting her? Or is he so afraid that his way of dealing with his fear is to try to make the woman even more afraid than he is, so he can exert some control over her and hence over some aspect of the situation? We don't really know, but there does seem to be some tension between these two people. They're not on the same page. Let's look now at the sentences these words form, or the sentence structure. The woman and the man don't speak in complete sentences. They say the wind, hunters, the rain, the army. What does that suggest? They're too tense to form complete sentences? They feel so out of control they can't control how they speak. Now, let's consider the structure of the sentences that contain what they say. "The wind," said the woman. "Hunters," said the man. "The rain," said the woman. "The army," said the man. Said the woman. Said the man. Said the woman. Said the man. What's with the repetition of said the woman, said the man, said the woman, said the man? It suggests a back and forth. She offers an idea, he offers an alternative. She offers an idea, he offers another alternative. To me, it suggests a competition, like a tennis match. She hits the ball and he hits it back. Or boxing match. She punches and he punches. The repetition suggests to me they're fighting with each other. There's a conflict between them. Consider now how these sentences form a paragraph. Consider paragraph structure. Why did Davis put all these sentences together in one single paragraph? The story is short, but it would have been more conventional to begin a new paragraph with each line of dialogue. Let's look at the paragraph. The very words and sentences of the paragraph look huddled together, almost as if they're cowering like the characters. And the dialogue of the man and woman, since the dialogue doesn't start on new lines, the words that they speak to each other are close together too, suggesting, I think, that they're physically close together and also that they're replying to each other very quickly, like they're having a fight like a couple in the middle of this strange countryside where they're hearing strange sounds. Putting all the words together in a single paragraph like this, cramming them together, I think increases the tension of the story. Now, if the couple is fighting, whose side does the story take? Let's consider perspective. The perspective of the story might seem at first very detached, very distant from the events. It's a third-person narrator who can't or won't tell us the names of the people, or what they or their house looks like, or where it is, or what the sounds actually are. And the narrator might seem to be equally detached from the woman and the man, since the narrator simply reports what they both do and say. But then, in the last sentence, the narrator tells us what the woman is feeling and thinking. The narrator never tells us what the man is feeling or thinking. So who does the narrator sympathize with? Is the narrator trying to draw our sympathies toward the woman? Let's look at what the woman is thinking. The woman wanted to go home, but she was already home, there in the middle of the country in a house besieged. That's a strange statement. It almost seems to contradict itself. So let's consider contradictions. If you're ever reading a story and you come to a point that doesn't make sense to you, or that seems to contradict common sense, or even to contradict itself, don't ignore it. Focus on it. That part of the story that confuses you, that seems to contradict common sense or to contradict itself, probably also confuses other readers. It's probably also the most important and interesting part of the story, and probably something the author thought a lot about. For all those reasons, it's the part of the story where you can begin to think about and produce your own interpretation of the story. Your interpretation of what the story means or is about, or your interpretation of what the story does, is largely going to depend upon how you make sense of the story's strangest moments. So what does it mean that the woman wanted to go home, but she was already home? I don't know. It could mean a lot of things. For me, it suggests that she does not feel safe in the only place where she possibly could feel safe, which means that there is nowhere she could possibly go to feel safe, which means there is no way out of this frightening situation. But how you think about and think through a text's seeming contradictions will tell you a lot about what the story might mean to you, and maybe also to another reader. Finally, when you close read, you'll want to pay attention to a text's imagery. What images do the words of a text bring to mind? Consider the word besieged. If something is besieged, it means it's surrounded by armed forces aiming to capture it or force it to surrender. Now, are there actually armed forces surrounding this house? We don't know. Maybe. But the word itself brings images of armed forces, of soldiers, into mind. That imagery accentuates the sense of danger in the story, the seriousness of the feeling of danger that these two people feel, whatever the danger might actually be. And it also suggests that this house is, in some sense, either literal or metaphorical, under attack, given the conflict between the man and the woman and the fact that the story's perspective shifts to that of the woman. I wonder if one of the attackers is, in a sense, the man. So, in the end, my interpretation of this very short, very strange story is that it's about a woman who feels completely alone, who feels she has absolutely no refuge, who feels completely exposed to threats, completely vulnerable to the world's dangers, and who feels she has nowhere to go and no one to turn to. But that's my interpretation of the story. You might interpret it very differently. And you can. If you were to write a paper on this story for this class, you could interpret this story very differently than I have. You could offer your own interpretation, and it would hold up, as long as it was based on close reading, as long as it was based on the story's word choice, sentence structure, paragraph structure, perspective, contradictions, and imagery. Now, I've also given you a short essay by Lydia Davis about how she wrote this story. I'm not going to go into it in depth in this video, but reading it, you'll see that she considered, as she wrote the story, many of the things we've considered as we've closer read the story. And here's the point. When you write, when you want to create a certain mood, or produce a certain emotion, or communicate a certain idea with your writing, you need to consider your own word choice, sentence structure, paragraph structure, perspective, contradictions, and imagery. Because you apply very similar skills to close reading as you do to writing. So that as you read, you also learn to write.